Steam curled against the tiled walls, hissing from overhead pipes. A line of German women, uniforms clinging to their thin frames, stepped barefoot onto wet concrete. Their eyes darted toward the ceiling, to the drains, to the guards beyond the doorway. A bar of soap passed from hand to trembling hand, slick and alien. Anna raised it to her nose, uncertain. "It smells like flowers?" she whispered. Elsa frowned, recoiling. "No, it smells unnatural." They lathered cautiously, glances sharp with fear. In silence, suspicion mingled with disbelief. Was this safety or another cruel deception? The streets of Germany in 1945 lay shattered beneath gray skies. Buildings stood like broken teeth, their walls hollowed by fire. Children with soot-blackened faces picked through rubble for splinters of coal. Women in patched dresses lifted bricks with raw hands, forming Trümmerfrauen, the rubble brigades that became the backbone of survival. The Reich had promised them glory. What remained was silence, hunger, and ruins. Posters of Hitler still clung stubbornly to walls, half-peeled, rain streaking his image into ghostly smears. Above them, Allied leaflets fluttered down like falling birds, carrying words of surrender and promises of bread. Radios, once blasting speeches of triumph, now croaked foreign voices. Germany has capitulated. Lay down arms. The war is over. Yet for women in the wreckage, war never truly ended. It lingered in the emptiness of cupboards, in the echo of boots that would never return, in the small white crosses scattered across meadows. Anna and Elsa trudged through the ruins of Dresden, their stomachs hollow, their eyes still burning with smoke. Around them, whispers spread. Women were being taken into custody, not to Siberia, not to punishment, but across the ocean, to America. "They say the Americans treat us better than the Russians," Marta muttered, her voice low but sharp. She was older than most, a widow with deep lines carved into her face. The black kerchief around her head marked her grief as much as her poverty. Anna glanced at her, uncertain. "Do you believe it?" Marta shrugged, hoisting a sack of salvaged potatoes. "Belief is a luxury. My husband believed in Hitler's victory until the end. Look where it carried him. Into the earth." Johanna, once a nurse in Leipzig, kept silent until the group reached a half-collapsed railway station. She looked at the peeling timetable nailed to the wall, useless now, and spoke bitterly. "I don't believe anything anymore." Beside her stood Liesel, barely 20, a typist whose pressed skirt still carried faint traces of office work. Her eyes darted nervously as she clutched a folded pamphlet she had hidden away, one of Goebbels' speeches printed in bold type. "It cannot be true," she insisted, voice trembling. "They will treat us like animals. The Americans are no better. This is all propaganda, just the enemy's lies." Marta gave a harsh laugh. "Child, propaganda is all we ever breathed. You still taste it because you're too young to know the flavor of hunger." A whistle blew in the distance. Soldiers appeared. Americans, their uniforms clean, their boots polished, their rifles slung but not pointed. The contrast was unbearable. The women who had once been hailed as loyal workers for the Reich now found themselves rounded up like strays, lined along platforms under foreign orders. Anna felt her pulse quicken. Elsa clutched her arm. "Do you think they will kill us?" "No," Anna whispered, watching the Americans gesture briskly. "If they wanted to, they would have done it already." Narration drifts outward. At war's end, the Allied armies held millions of prisoners. Men were sent to camps across Europe. Women, less often captured, were gathered from ruined towns where they worked in communications, offices, or auxiliary units. Many expected punishment, exile, or worse. The reality proved stranger. They were shipped to America, both as security risks and as labor. The train cars stood waiting, their metal sides streaked with grime. Inside, wooden benches, buckets for water, space enough to sit but not to stretch. The women climbed aboard in silence, the clatter of boots echoing through the station. Each held on to a bundle of belongings, a scarf, a diary, a photograph. Little else remained of their former lives. Through the slats, Liesel stared back at the ruined skyline. "Germany will rise again," she whispered, convincing no one. Johanna turned away, eyes fixed on the horizon where the tracks disappeared into smoke. "Germany must first survive. That will be enough." The doors slammed shut. The train jolted forward. With each turn of the wheels, illusions collapsed behind them. The Reich, the promises, the certainty of home. What lay ahead was an unknown continent, across an ocean they had never seen, inside a captivity they could not imagine. The sea was endless, a rolling gray expanse that heaved against the sides of the transport ship. The women huddled together on the deck, wrapped in coarse blankets issued by the Americans, their faces pale with seasickness. Salt stung their lips, and every lurch of the vessel sent a shiver of nausea through their stomachs. They had never imagined water like this. In Germany, rivers were narrow, contained, bordered by bridges and houses. Here, horizon swallowed sky, and the ship was a floating cage. Elsa gripped the railing, knuckles white. "It feels like the world is drowning," she whispered. Anna steadied her, though her own stomach turned. "It feels like freedom, too. Nothing holds us here." Marta gave a low grunt from where she sat, clutching her bundle of belongings. "Freedom. Do you call being herded onto a ship freedom? You are too young to know the taste of chains." Johanna, calmer than most, passed a water canteen around. "Chains or not, at least we are not in Russian hands." Her eyes drifted to the sea. "That is a mercy we cannot measure." Below deck, the air was thick and sour, crowded with rows of bunks. The women lay shoulder to shoulder, listening to the groan of engines and the muffled footsteps of guards. Yet the guards did not shout, nor strike, nor starve them. They enforced order, but with a distance that unsettled as much as it relieved. On the third day, the Americans handed out rations, soft white bread, slabs of butter, even small squares of chocolate. The women stared at it in disbelief. Elsa lifted a piece of bread to her lips, eyes wide. "This bread, it's like cake," Marta sniffed suspiciously. "Too soft. Nothing this rich can be trusted." A calm voice spoke from nearby. "Trust is not the point. Taste is." The speaker was Hilda, a tall woman with streaks of gray in her hair, her posture erect despite exhaustion. She had once been a teacher in Munich, her words measured, her tone deliberate. She broke her bread, quoting softly, almost to herself, "Wer nie sein Brot mit Tränen aß." He who never ate his bread with tears. Elsa blinked. "What does it mean?" Hilda met her gaze. "It means remember this moment. They told us American food was poison. Yet here it is, soft in your hands, sweet in your mouth. This is what lies taste like when they vanish." Anna chewed slowly, uncertain. "Then what should we believe now?" "Nothing," Hilda answered. "And everything. That is the lesson of war." Narration widens. The transport of German prisoners followed strict regulations. The Red Cross monitored conditions, ensuring food, medical care, and humane treatment. For women, the journey was both a humiliation and a revelation. They had been told to fear poison and cruelty. Instead, they were given blankets, bread, and the vastness of the Atlantic. At night, the women gathered in corners of the deck, whispering rumors. Some believed they would be sent to factories as slaves. Others insisted America wanted them as bargaining chips. Liesel clung to her belief that all of this was a trick, that the kindness was a mask before punishment. Marta said little, her silence heavier than words. The ship plowed on. Days blurred into one another, endless sea, endless waiting. Yet within the monotony, something subtle shifted. The women laughed once, briefly, when a wave sprayed over the deck and drenched Elsa completely. She sputtered, hair plastered to her cheeks, while Anna giggled helplessly. Even Marta cracked a small smile. For the first time in years, laughter rose above the din of engines. It sounded strange, unfamiliar, almost dangerous, but it lingered like the taste of bread, like the shock of survival in an unknown world. The horizon stretched westward, and with each mile, Germany receded further into memory. The whistle of the train cut through the air as the women pressed their faces to the glass. eyes straining for the first glimpse of America. What they saw was not ruins, not rubble, not the ash of bombed-out cities, but wide skies stretched forever, fields rippling green, and barns painted a bright, impossible red. Greta, a sturdy girl with sun-worn hands, let out a strangled gasp. "Look," she whispered, pointing as the train clattered past. "Tractors, so many, and bigger than any in Germany." Her voice cracked as she pressed her forehead to the window. "Their cows are fatter than our children." Laughter rippled uneasily, not from joy, but from disbelief. On the platform, American soldiers stood in pressed uniforms, boots polished, rifles slung casually as though danger were far away. They chewed gum, leaned on fences, and smiled with an ease that unsettled the women. These were not the brutes of propaganda posters, with fangs and whips. They looked ordinary, even kind, and that made the humiliation worse. Johanna muttered under her breath, "They look healthier than our doctors." Anna noticed their height. The soldiers towered above them, shoulders broad, skin tanned. Elsa whispered, "They must eat meat every day." As the women disembarked, Clara walked with measured steps, notebook in hand. She had been a student once, a thinker, and now she recorded everything in her neat handwriting, as though documenting might give her control. Her pencil scratched. "Abundance is a weapon sharper than guns." The camp lay beyond the fields, surrounded by barbed wire. But even here, order prevailed. Wooden barracks stood in straight lines, roofs intact, windows clean. Laundry hung in neat rows. The very fences seemed built with more care than the ruins of their homes. The women were processed, names taken, belongings catalogued, uniforms exchanged for cleaner garments. Soap was issued, as if hygiene itself was a part of their captivity. Marta scowled as she tugged the stiff fabric of her new uniform. "Even their prisons are tidy," she spat. Hilda, adjusting her collar, murmured, "Discipline has many faces." Here it smiles. Meals shocked them most of all. In the mess hall, long tables groaned with trays of food, bread, bacon, potatoes, beans. Greta stared openly at the platters, her lips parting in silent awe. Back home, she had seen children fight over potato skins. Here, scraps were scraped into bins. Elsa leaned close to Anna, whispering, "It feels like insult to feed us so well when our families starve." Anna shook her head. Or perhaps it's a message. Documentary voiceover. In the rural Midwest, camps housed thousands of German prisoners. Surrounded by barbed wire yet treated with relative dignity, the POWs were both laborers and witnesses. To the women, raised on scarcity, propaganda, and fear, the shock of American plenty was disarming. They entered captivity, but it felt like stepping into another world. At night, Clara wrote by the dim glow of a lamp, "The fields are wide, the barns tall, the men taller still. They smile, and I cannot understand it. The fence cuts us off, yet abundance presses against the wire. We were told they would kill us. Instead, they shame us with bread and meat." Her pencil lingered over the page before she wrote the final line. "We are defeated not by bombs, but by plenty." Beyond the barracks, crickets sang in the grass. A guard leaned lazily against a fence post, chewing gum, his rifle cradled without urgency. The women lay in bunks, staring into darkness, their bellies full for the first time in years, yet restless, uneasy. The women stood in line, clutching their uniforms to their chests. The tiled building loomed ahead, its walls whitewashed, its roof venting steam into the autumn air. The sound of rushing water carried through the doorway, echoing, hollow and menacing. Whispers passed from mouth to mouth. Some froze, trembling as the line shuffled forward. Liesel's face had gone pale, her hands trembling violently. She leaned into Marta's shoulder, voice cracking. "They want to kill us," she whispered, eyes darting toward the soldiers at the entrance. "Like the stories. The camps in Poland. The gas." Marta tightened her jaw, gripping her hand hard enough to steady it. "No," she said, though doubt gnawed her too. "We are too many, and this is America." Inside, the air was warm and heavy with steam. pipes hissed. Nozzles protruded from tiled walls like cold eyes. The women undressed in silence, each movement stiff with fear, their ribs jutting against skin. They stepped onto slick concrete floors, bare feet slapping against the wet surface. Then the first hiss of water burst overhead, warm, not suffocating. A gasp tore from Liesel's throat. Marta flinched, waiting for something more sinister, but the spray fell harmlessly, splattering against their shoulders, trickling down their backs. Steam rose around them in clouds. Anna reached hesitantly for the bar of soap. Oval, pink, its surface smooth and fragrant. She sniffed, bewildered, and passed it to Elsa. The scent of lavender filled the room, thick and sweet. Elsa recoiled. "It smells unnatural," she murmured again, as if the perfume itself were a trick. Liesel pressed her back against the wall, shaking. "It's poison," she hissed. "I know it." But Marta, taking the soap firmly in her palm, raised it to her nose. The fragrance clung to her skin. She breathed deeply, closing her eyes. "No," she said slowly, her voice softening. "They want us to smell clean." One by one, the women lathered the bar, suds foaming between their fingers, slipping down their arms. The scent spread across the room until the steam itself seemed perfumed. Suspicion dissolved into strange bewilderment. For many, it was the first true wash in years. Dirt streaked away, caked under fingernails running in rivulets toward the drains. Scars, bruises, and hunger-marked bodies gleamed beneath the mist. Johanna muttered, almost bitterly, "All this water, all this soap, while our families dig through rubble for bread." Clara's voice answered softly, writing the thought already in her mind. "Cleansing is its own weapon. They wash us, and we cannot help but feel new." Documentary voiceover. The U.S. Army required strict hygiene for all prisoners of war. Shower houses were installed in camps, medical checks were routine, and soap was issued in abundance. To women who had lived through years of scarcity, propaganda, and fear, the simple act of bathing carried layers of terror and rebirth. As the women stepped back into the crisp night air, hair damp, skin fragrant, they exchanged glances both ashamed and relieved. For the first time in years, they were clean, and for the first time in captivity, they felt almost human. Dawn came with a whistle. Boots struck gravel, and the women filed out of the barracks into the cool morning air. Roll call was brisk, names checked against lists, numbers shouted, pencils scratching on clipboards. Guards stood by, relaxed but watchful, their rifles slung low. The women had expected cruelty. Instead, they found rhythm. After roll call came breakfast. Eggs, bread, sometimes bacon, sometimes oatmeal with sugar. Coffee, black and steaming, was ladled into tin mugs. The bitter warmth startled them more than comforted. They had heard of it only in whispers, a drink of luxury reserved for officers. Now it was routine. Frida, once a factory worker, sat at the long mess table, eyeing her tray with a half-smile, half-sneer. "If this is prison," she muttered, raising her fork, "what was freedom?" The others glanced at her, some bristling at the bitterness, others silently agreeing. Ruth, the youngest, only 17, sat beside her. Her small hands cradled the mug of coffee like treasure. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "At least here. I am not hungry." Silence fell for a moment, the weight of her words heavier than barbed wire. After meals, assignments were given. Some worked in fields beyond the camp, under guard but in open air, harvesting corn or hauling hay. Others tended camp gardens, cleaned kitchens, or mended uniforms. To women used to bombed-out factories and hunger-driven scavenging, the labor felt almost ordinary. Great marveled at the American tractors again, watching them roar across the fields with a speed that made her ache. "One machine replaces a dozen men," she murmured, half in awe, half in despair. In the afternoons, the camp staff offered English lessons. A few women attended, curious, while others scoffed, refusing to let foreign words soil their tongues. Hilda, the former teacher, embraced it eagerly, writing phrases neatly in her notebook. "Good morning. Thank you, bread." She quoted Goethe to her classmates in the evenings. Trying to bridge the strangeness with the familiar soap became its own symbol. Each woman received a ration, oval bars with faint floral scents. They guarded them carefully, tucking them into lockers like talismans. For Liesel, who still clung to fragments of propaganda, the soap was both comfort and insult. "Perfume in prison," she scoffed one evening. "And in Berlin, children dig for coal in the ashes." Toothpaste, too, felt decadent. The cool, minty burn on their tongues was unlike anything they had known. Elsa giggled the first time she tried it, coughing and spitting into the sink. "It tastes like chemicals," she exclaimed, wiping her mouth with her sleeve. Anna corrected her, half laughing. "No, it tastes like health." Evenings were quieter. The women gathered on bunks, writing letters, mending socks, or sitting in silence. Clara filled her diary, noting every detail. Coffee at sunrise. Soap at night. Is this kindness or strategy? Marta, sharpening her tone, answered without being asked. "It's both." Documentary voiceover. Under the Geneva Convention, POWs were entitled to humane treatment. In American camps, rations often exceeded what civilians in war-torn Europe received. Soap, coffee, and meat became emblems of contradiction, signs of captivity, yet also of care. Some women grew resentful. Why should their families starve while they lived better behind fences? Others, like Ruth, found fragile safety. At night, she whispered prayers of thanks, not for victory or freedom, but for bread and warmth. The camp routine settled into them like a second skin. Days passed in labor and meals, nights in uneasy sleep, and always, beneath it all, the gnawing contradiction. They were prisoners, yet more nourished, more secure than they had been in their so-called freedom. The first letters arrived months after capture, slipped into calloused hands like relics. Thin envelopes, censored with black bars, carried fragments of home. Women gathered in tight circles holding paper to their faces as if the scent of ink might bridge oceans. Anna read aloud from hers, voice trembling. "Mother says the roof is gone. They sleep in the cellar. Potatoes, little else." She folded it quickly, as if shame were contagious. Greta clutched her letter to her chest, whispering, "At least they live. That is enough." But not all words brought comfort. Marta unfolded hers slowly. The lines spoke of graves of a husband never returning. She did not weep. Instead, she stared at the wire fence until the sun slipped low. At night, Clara scribbled furiously in her diary, recording scraps from others' letters. "Hunger," she wrote. "Cold, endless queues. Children faint in the streets." She underlined the words, then paused as rumors buzzed around the barracks. "They say some will never go home," whispered Liesel, eyes wide. "The Americans will keep us here to work." Ruth curled against her blanket, shivering despite the warmth. "Forever?" she breathed. "I cannot bear forever." Clara asked the question aloud the next day, her voice catching. "What if they keep us here forever?" Hilda, who had become the quiet center of their circle, lifted her eyes from a book of borrowed poetry. Her tone was steady, almost tender. "Then perhaps forever is not so terrible." The women turned toward her, startled. Hilda closed the book and continued. "Here we eat. Here we learn. Here we are not bombed nor hunted. Do you not see? Captivity is cruel, yes, but outside, survival is crueler still." Some nodded reluctantly. Others bristled, unwilling to accept peace behind wire. Documentary voiceover. Letters were censored by U.S. authorities, black ink striking out sentences deemed dangerous. Yet, even half erased, they shaped the emotional landscape of captivity. News from ruined Germany deepened guilt, sharpened longing, and fractured hope. The barracks became a hive of divided voices. Marta, hardened by loss, muttered that she would never forgive captivity. Liesel clung to dreams of homecoming parades that would never come. Anna and Elsa wavered between despair and strange gratitude. And Ruth, young Ruth, folded her letter 100 times until it tore, holding the pieces like talismans. Evenings by lamplight. Hilda read aloud from Goethe, her voice soothing, weaving fragments of culture back into the women's bones. She reminded them of a Germany before ruins, of words beyond hunger. To some, she was a lifeline. To others, a reminder of how far they had fallen. The fence outside stood silent, yet rumors clung to it like frost. Would they cross it again, back to the homeland? Or would their lives dissolve here, measured by rations, soap, and censored letters? Hope flickered, fragile as candlelight. Despair pressed close, whispering in every silence. Time stretched, reshaping them all. The first time the women marched beyond the barbed wire, guarded yet free to breathe open air, they felt the earth beneath their boots differently. Rows of corn stretched beyond the horizon, golden under the sun. The fields seemed endless, unlike the bomb-shattered soil of home. They were assigned to farms, canning factories, sewing rooms. Some carried baskets heavy with apples, others stitched uniforms or packed jars of beans. At first, silence clung to them, heavy with pride and humiliation. But labor brought rhythm, and rhythm softened fear. Elsa, bent over a row of beans, glanced up at children playing nearby. They waved, laughing. She froze, unsure. Slowly, almost shyly, she lifted her hand in return. For the first time in years, laughter broke from her lips. It startled even herself. Later, over a midday break, Elsa whispered to Anna, "Do you think they hate us?" The farmer's wife, setting down a jug of cool water, overheard. She shook her head, her face weathered but kind. "Hate? No, you girls work hard. That's enough." The words lingered, more bewildering than hostility. Ruth, youngest of them all, worked in the canning shed. Her hands, too small for the heavy jars, trembled as she tried to keep pace. One afternoon, she dropped a jar and burst into tears. The farmer's wife crossed the floor quickly, not with anger but with a gentle hand on her shoulder. She guided Ruth to sit, pressing a slice of warm bread into her hand. "There now," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair from Ruth's face. "Eat. You're only a child." Ruth, who had not heard such tenderness since before the war, ate in silence, tears streaking her cheeks. That night, she whispered to Elsa, "I think I remembered what it feels like to have a mother." Documentary voiceover. Civilian labor programs for POWs were common across the American Midwest. Prisoners were sent to farms, factories, and workshops under guard, paid token wages or given extra rations. Local communities often encountered them not as enemies, but as laborers, sometimes even as neighbors. Still, not all welcomed them. Some townspeople looked away, lips tight with anger. The women felt the sting of stares, the reminder of what their homeland had done. Pride burned beneath the moments of kindness. Marta spat one evening as they trudged back to camp. "They smile at us in the fields, but do they know our children starve in the rubble? We should not accept their pity." But Hilda, always measured, replied softly, "It is not pity, Marta. It is something simpler. It is humanity." Even Clara, who scribbled every encounter into her diary, admitted that the contradictions gnawed at her. "They treat us well, better than our own army treated us. Does that not shame you?" Around the barracks at night, stories grew. A farmer who gave an apple, a child who asked for a German song, a wife who whispered, "You remind me of my sister." And yet, when silence fell, shame returned. They were prisoners. They wore uniforms not their own. They were daughters of a defeated land, dependent on the kindness of those they had been told to despise. Still, each day outside the fence chipped away at certainty. Hatred, once taught as truth, began to feel hollow. And in its place, confusing, dangerous, undeniable, something else took root. The days of labor ended in tired silence, boots dragging across gravel. Yet, when the sun dipped low, women drifted toward the barbed wire fence. It became their evening ritual, a place where words, dangerous and raw, slipped free under the darkening sky. They sat close, shoulders pressed, eyes on the horizon beyond the wire. The camp smelled of supper, smoke curling from the kitchens. Bacon lingered strongest of all, its rich scent clinging to their clothes and memories. Anna inhaled deeply. "If only my mother could smell this," she whispered. "She would think she was dreaming." Elsa laughed softly, though her eyes shone with sadness. "Back home, we boiled weeds for soup. Here, they give us meat every day. And yet—" She hesitated, then finished. "And yet, I feel ashamed for enjoying it." Marta spat into the dirt. "Enjoy it or not, it changes nothing. We are still prisoners. But what kind of prison is this?" Johanna asked suddenly, her gaze fixed on the lamps glowing across camp. I watched the American nurses, their crisp uniforms, their laughter. They are free, respected. If our men had treated us like this, perhaps we would not have lost. The words hung heavy, shocking in their honesty. Anna, quiet until then, leaned forward. "Perhaps we lost because we believed lies," she said. "Lies about strength. Lies about enemies. Lies about ourselves." Clara, scribbling in her diary, murmured, "And now, truth arrives as bacon and soap. How strange." Documentary voiceover. Psychologists later studied the identity crisis among German POWs in America. Well-fed, treated humanely, and exposed to abundance, many wrestled with feelings of betrayal, both by their homeland's propaganda and by the unexpected kindness of their captors. Hilda quoted Goethe under her breath. "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." Her words made Elsa shiver. Ruth, still fragile, spoke almost in a whisper. "When I eat here, I'm not hungry. When I sleep here, bombs do not fall. But when I remember Germany, I feel guilty for both." Marta pressed her fists into her knees. "Do not mistake this kindness for forgiveness. They feed us, yes, but they will send us back. And what then? To ruins, to graves, to nothing." Greta pointed beyond the wire at vast American fields bathed in moonlight. "I see their tractors, their barns full of hay. Our children starve while their cows grow fat. How can the world be so divided?" Johanna exhaled sharply, a mix of longing and despair. "I envy them. Their women work, yes, but they are not broken. They are proud. They are free." The group fell into silence, broken only by the hum of insects and the distant crackle of a radio in the guards' quarters. Playing American Swing, they sat until night swallowed the horizon, staring through the fence as if it were a mirror, reflecting both what they had lost and what they were beginning, reluctantly, to admire. The train waited at the siding, black smoke curling into the pale morning sky. Suitcases, issued by the camp, patched and serviceable, were stacked neatly beside the women. A final roll call was taken. Names echoed in the crisp air, each syllable carrying the weight of years. They boarded slowly, as though their feet resisted the motion. Every step away from the barracks, the kitchens, the fields, felt unreal. Behind them, the camp stood silent. Bunks stripped bare, chow halls swept clean, fences humming faintly in the breeze. It was both empty and alive, as if the memory of their voices still clung to the walls. Anna turned for one last look. The mess hall, where the smell of bacon had once startled her into disbelief, stood quiet. "I never thought soap could carry so much memory," she murmured, clutching a small bar she had saved, now wrapped carefully in cloth. Elsa, standing beside her, gave a faint smile. "We leave with more than we arrived, with questions." The train whistle blew, urgent, pulling them forward. They took their seats on hard wooden benches. Some wept openly, others sat rigid, eyes fixed on nothing. Liesel clutched Marta's hand, whispering prayers. Ruth pressed her forehead to the glass, watching the camp recede until it dissolved into fields. Documentary voiceover. By 1946, most German prisoners of war in the United States were repatriated. The journey home led not to comfort, but to devastation. Cities lay in ruins, families scattered, hunger waiting. Many POWs later confessed that captivity in America had been the safest, most nourishing years of their young lives. On the train, letters were passed around. Pages yellowed by time recounting bacon, soap, toothpaste, coffee. Each word read aloud was part confession, part farewell. Clara tucked her diary into her coat, determined to carry the memory of contradictions with her. Prison meals that were feasts, guards who became protectors, fences that felt less confining than the fear back home. Johanna, gazing at her reflection in the window, spoke softly. If our men had treated us as the Americans did, perhaps we would not have lost. Perhaps we would not have destroyed ourselves. Her words lingered in the air, unchallenged. The rhythm of the train filled the silences between them. For every mile gained toward Germany, they felt a mile lost from a strange, paradoxical refuge. Hilda broke the quiet. Remember this, not for what it was meant to be, a prison, but for what it became, proof that kindness can exist, even among enemies. The women nodded, some with tears, some with resolve. They did not know what waited ahead, only that they would step into ruins carrying memories that defied easy judgment. Through the windows, the land rolled on. America blurred behind them. Ahead lay Germany, battered and broken. Between the two, in their hearts, lived a paradox: captivity as defeat, yet survival; prison as sanctuary; strangers as unexpected saviors. The train rattled forward, carrying them not just home, but into history,